On the evening of May 21st of 1796, cast your mind back. The evening in May, a spring evening in 1796, a young 21-year-old woman named Ona Judge, Ona Judge, made the daring decision to free herself. I'm reading from a digital newspaper out of Philadelphia, the Philly Voice. And this was the story. Considering the prominence of her owner and the laws of the time and the dangerous trek to New Hampshire, a place where she could live discreetly but freely. Now, I think that may be a little bit of an oxymoron, to live discreetly but freely. But anyway, this act to free herself carried remarkable risk, but she slipped out of the president's house undetected while the first family dined. This house was located at the corner of 6th and Market Streets in Philadelphia, and it served as the first executive mansion. It was just a few feet from Independence Hall, where the Declaration was signed and where the big Liberty Bell hangs now. Later, Miss Judge described her narrow escape to an abolitionist newspaper. She said, "I had friends among the colored people of Philadelphia and had my things carried there beforehand." She'd made a plan and left Washington's house while they were eating dinner. Can you imagine the bravery it took? When George Washington was elected president, he reluctantly left behind his plantation at Mount Vernon to serve in Philadelphia, which was the temporary seat of the nation's capital. And as he was setting up household, he brought along 9 enslaved people, his property, including Miss Ona Judge. As the president grew accustomed to the northern ways, there was one change that he really couldn't abide. Pennsylvania law required that enslaved people be set free after 6 months of residency in the state. If it was a free state, if you were there for 6 months, you had to be set free. Well, rather than comply, George Washington decided to circumvent the law. Every 6 months, he sent his enslaved people, his property, back down to the South, just as the clock was about to expire. Now that's some diabolical, isn't it? Yeah. One of those enslaved people was Ona Judge, and she served as a chambermaid to Martha Washington. On the eve of one of these transfers, as the party was about to go back down to Virginia, Martha Washington was going to bequeath Miss Judge to her granddaughter who was getting married. Martha Washington's granddaughter was getting married. And this is how property, human beings as property, changed hands, right? I give you that painting. I give you that piece of furniture. I give you that human being. Shocking to us and our sensibilities, and not surprising. So when the opportunity presented itself, Miss Judge knew that if she went back and were given to someone else, she would never have her chance to find her way to freedom, to pursue freedom. So when it presented itself on this clear and pleasant evening in Philadelphia, Miss Judge left everything she knew to escape to New England. And freedom would not come without its cost. She became the subject of an intense hunt by George Washington and his political and personal contacts to recapture his property. But she was never caught. She was a freedom seeker who found freedom, and she was never caught. I read Miss Judge's story in a place that some of you may have seen it. It was an outdoor display in Philadelphia one cool spring afternoon when I was there for a training. And it's on the site of the president's house, which no longer stands, but one can walk among the foundation stones of that house. And there were large panels through the whole thing that told the story of the first president and the enslaved members of his household. Have some of you seen this exhibit? Is this familiar to you? Maybe a couple. The exhibit, Freedom and Slavery in the Making of the New Nation, had 34 of these big panels, and you could walk along and see them. Bolted onto the brick walls, they provided biographical details about the 9 people the Washingtons owned while living in the presidential mansion. And it was really a sobering reality of our nation's first president who enslaved people while he held the nation's highest office. That's not a secret. We know this. This is not a secret. It's not often taught in history classes, and it's certainly not as well known as the apocryphal cherry tree story, right? We all grew up with you know the cherry tree story. Do some of our young people not know the cherry tree story? Excellent. Fantastic. The story was, did he chop down the cherry tree, and George Washington, and he told his father he did because he could not tell a lie. That probably never happened in that way, but it made a very nice story to tell to children to say, don't lie, right? Well, this exhibit was created in 2006 in partnership with the city of Philadelphia. So for the last 20 years, people have been able to go and see this until a shocking but not surprising turn of events. On January 22nd and 23rd of this year, the National Park Service, under the direction of Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and Director Jessica Brown, followed an executive order directing the Park Service to review and remove materials that inappropriately disparage Americans, and this line, promote corrosive ideology. Whew, that's a chilling effect. The city of Philadelphia has filed a federal lawsuit, and a judge has ordered that the government protect those panels and restore any damage that they did when they were removing them as the case is being decided. In a country built on white supremacy, this is how whitewashing, literal whitewashing, is done. Right? Someone decides what history we read on behalf of our government, says what they get to say. And so we, the people, have some say in that. We could post anything we wanted here. We make our own decisions here at the fellowship. We could post any art or whatever that we want to, but the government has said in March of 25, you can't have anything that inappropriately disparages Americans, by which it is understood to mean white Americans. This is not new. In 1926, 100 years ago this month, African-American Carter G. Woodson, who was himself the son of enslaved parents, created Negro History Week in February to honor the legacies of Black Americans, to tell stories that were not being told. He was a reader, he was a student of history, and he said, where are the stories of my people? They weren't there. He chose February because Black Americans were accustomed to celebrating 2 birthdays in February, Abraham Lincoln on February 12th and Frederick Douglass on February 14th. So like a good historian, he used the traditions that were already in play to create Negro History Week. By the late 60s, young Blacks on college campuses were becoming increasingly conscious of links to Africa, and Black History Month replaced Negro History Week at a quickening pace. In 1976, 50 years after the first celebration, President Gerald Ford was encouraged to, and did, make a proclamation in honor of Black History Month. And since the mid-70s, every single American president, Democrat and Republican, has issued proclamations endorsing this annual theme, even the current occupant. I know. In so many ways, our national moment is precarious, with rising fascism and authoritarianism. And according to the Keene College Holocaust Center, one of the key tenets of fascism is white replacement theory. Are you familiar with this phrase, white replacement theory? It's used to show the democratic ideals, used to show that the democratic ideals of freedom and equality are a threat, and to oppose any initiative that is racially, ethnically, or religiously harmonious. So what Mr. Obama was saying about the warring narratives of this country, one is that we the people means exactly what it says, we the people. And the other is that we the people means only a select group of people, right? That freedom and equality are a threat. And indeed, they are a threat to authoritarianism. So in these warring factions, we see it now as particularly precarious and onerous. And in fact, it's always been with us. So these ideas have been with us from the past for a long time. They're not a surprise to us. As Unitarian Universalists, part of our history and DNA includes both abolitionists who were working in the Unitarian and Universalist movements, a lot of abolitionist history, and also merchants in Boston, the wealthy merchants in Boston who benefited from the cotton economy. We have both sides of this story in our DNA. So when I say I'm shocked by what's happening in our country, it is to say, I need to know more about how my internalized white supremacy culture, how a system that has benefited me is rooted in my brain, right? Why does it matter to me? So that I can be a critical thinker when I encounter stories of blackness and whiteness and narratives from either side of this, or whitewashed history. How can I be a critical reader and thinker of that? So in the past, we've heard some of these stories from the past. In the present, right now, it's very, very lively. How many of you saw the Bad Bunny halftime concert? Fun? Were you offended? Excellent. Same. I thought it was a gas, right? And this idea of community, of culture, of freedom, of stories, telling stories, and how that resilience and excellence comes through. Right now, there's a State Department nominee to lead, get this, he's to lead the outreach to international organizations. You may have heard some of his hearing this week. He went on and on about white cultural genocide. That's who we have as a nominee, and that's both shocking and not surprising, right? That's the setting we're in. A writer that I've been compelled by, N.K. Jemisin, is a speculative fiction writer. She writes science fiction and fantasy and talks about Afrofuturism. And she had this essay around 2015 called How Long Till Black Future Month? How long till Black Future Month, right? We're telling all these stories of history. But when she was a kid, she was watching reruns of the Jetsons, right? Some of you remember the Jetsons. Some of you are way too young to know anything about the Jetsons. The Jetsons was this futuristic cartoon show that was produced by Hanna-Barbera in the 1962-63 television season. I was born in 62, so I grew up on reruns of the Jetsons. There are no black folks in the Jetsons. And you know, that show, that was not so different than the other shows that aired that season, the Beverly Hillbillies and I Love Lucy and Gunsmoke and Perry Mason and Bonanza. But even in the future, no black folks only white faces, no brown-skinned faces in the future. It made Miss Jemison wonder if only white people would populate the future. And even now, that 11 years since she wrote the essay, speculative fiction, science fiction, and fantasy, to a lesser extent maybe horror, has brown and black-skinned people are woefully underrepresented. What she says is, it seemed to be fine with the white readers. Nobody was demanding something different. And in that way, she implicates readers who may not have recognized what was missing, that something was missing, and what it was that was missing. Right now, I'm watching my binge watch right now is just absolutely the most innocuous show you've ever seen. It's called Sweet Magnolias, and it's on Netflix. In Serenity, South Carolina, where the accents are very, very mixed. And white folks and black folks live side by side. There is apparently no poverty whatsoever, nor was there ever any racial animus in this lovely town. It's the story of three good friends, one African-American woman and two white women, and the stories of their children and their friends and the church that they all go to, very Christian church, with a black woman pastor, thank you, that doesn't cause any problems for anybody. It is just sweet as can be. Sometimes after washing it, my teeth hurt. It's so sweet. I don't really recommend it. But it's a good show to watch after a day of the heaviness of the world. I could just sit and knit and have one ear halfway on it, you know. But if I don't recognize that this is whitewashed history, that this is some fantasy of how the world is, without having come through some racial animus, what has happened over the years in South Carolina, that people are different, that they don't magically reach this kind of community. It's really a story about community that pretends to love each other but maybe doesn't have any warts. And to me, that's not how we are. That's not who we are. I do not love you because you have no warts. And you've told me about some of your warts. We don't love each other because we are perfect and have nothing to rub against. That would be easy and cheap. I guess that's what it feels like. It feels like cheap grace, right? It's fine, it's fine. But if I don't watch that with a critical eye, it's no different than watching Bonanza and believing that that was the history of how indigenous Americans interacted with landowners in the American West. That watching the Jetsons is how the future will be. It's made up, right? And we can make up stories, but my own work, our own work, to navigate where white supremacy lives in my head is the critical piece of it. Then we can watch what we watch. We can listen to what we listen to. And we can watch with a curious and open heart, Bad Bunny, or watch a hearing, a congressional hearing, and be able to have some critical thinking about it. I demand for myself. Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without a demand. That's true in our world and true in my own heart. I need to demand for myself better representation so that I can hear full stories. And that's what Carter Woodson was doing when he created Black History Month, to bring those narratives, the other side of the narratives of we the people, into the public eye. So when I say I don't recognize my country or that fascism is something new, I'm ignoring the fact that it has always been here. It may be shocking now, but not surprising. And the more we can say, but this is who we are, there is a different narrative, and not give up in advance, and allow Black excellence and Black history to help lead the way for us, the more we can be about the work of demanding better from ourselves, from our neighbors, from our government, and from the world. Let us be about the work.